right, so are you ready for this? We are going deep into a world that might make even the biggest skeptics, at least raise an eyebrow a little bit. The world of clairvoyance.
Okay.
So you shared this YouTube video featuring Krzysztof Jackowski. He's a Polish clairvoyant. And honestly, even I had to rewatch it a couple of times to really process it all.
Yeah, it's definitely intriguing, to say the least. What I find particularly fascinating is how Jackowski attempts to connect with a recently deceased acquaintance.
Yeah.
Describing it as shedding these physical burdens, feeling his limbs fall away, experiencing this sense of lightness and freedom.
Yeah, those details really jumped out at me, too. It sounds almost like those near-death experiences you hear about, right? Where people describe feeling detached from their bodies in this profound sense of peace.
Exactly. And the way he contrasts that feeling of freedom with the sense of sadness and loneliness associated with potentially remaining in the earthly realm.
Right.
It really makes you think about those complex emotions that might be tied to the transition between life and death.
Right? Like, what would make someone linger? Is it unfinished business? A fear of the unknown? Or maybe even a deep attachment to the people and places they left behind?
Right.
It really gets you thinking about the psychological aspects of all of this.
It's fascinating to consider, especially since clairvoyance often delves into the unseen, right? The intangible.
Yeah.
We're dealing with claims of perceiving information beyond our typical five senses, which is a concept that has both intrigued and baffled people for centuries.
Okay, so let's unpack this idea of clairvoyance a bit more.
Yeah.
What are some of the theories out there about how it might actually work?
Well, there are a lot of different schools of thought on this. Some believe it involves tapping into energy fields or psychic abilities, while others suggest it might be about accessing this collective unconscious, the sort of universal reservoir of knowledge and experiences. There's even the idea of quantum entanglement, where particles are linked across vast distances, suggesting a potential for non-local connections that could explain phenomena like clairvoyance.
Whoa, that quantum entanglement stuff sounds straight out of a science fiction movie.
It's definitely mind-bending, but the truth is we're still a long way from understanding the full potential of consciousness and how it might interact with the world around us.
So getting back to Jackowski, one of the stories that really grabbed my attention was about the truck driver who died in an accident in Germany. Apparently, the driver's family wasn't satisfied with the official police report and reached out to Jackowski for more insight.
Oh, okay.
And that's
where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
Jackowski claims he used the deceased's belongings to connect and then received this unexpected message from a child during his vision.
Okay.
He actually emphasizes the importance of writing that message down,
Right.
as if it acted as a key to unlocking further visions.
Okay, now here comes the truly mind-blowing part. He describes seeing the accident in vivid detail. The setting, the events leading up to the crash, even the final impact. And what's chilling is that his account supposedly aligned perfectly with the police report.
Yeah, the alignment with official reports is certainly a recurring theme in these sorts of accounts. It definitely raises questions about the nature of time, memory, and perception.
Right.
Could these visions be tapping into some kind of universal archive of events, or is there something else at play?
And then there's that added layer of the deceased man's daughter who repeatedly claimed to see her father. She'd say things like, "You're here, but you're not alive," which echoes the message Jackowski received from the child during his vision.
The idea of children being more receptive to these sorts of phenomena is fascinating.
Yeah.
There's this recurring idea that children might be more open to experiences that lie beyond our typical five senses, perhaps, because they haven't yet developed the same filters and preconceived notions that adults have.
It's like they're still tuned into a frequency that most of us lose as we grow older.
Yeah.
It really makes you think about those childhood moments where you might have sensed something just beyond explanation, right?
Absolutely. It reminds us that there might be more to the world than meets the eye, even if we don't fully understand it yet.
Okay, so we've got attempts to connect with the dead visions, aligning with real-world events, and children potentially having heightened sensitivities. But Jackowski doesn't stop there. He then decides to try his abilities on some powerful figures, Dryman.
This is where we venture into the realm of what some call psychic espionage, which was a topic of much speculation, particularly during the Cold War era.
Yeah, it sounds like something straight out of a spy movie.
No.
So who does he focus on?
He mentions Aleksander Bartnikov, a figure associated with Russian intelligence and even an unnamed Chinese intelligence chief. But with Bartnikov, he encounters this resistance almost like hitting a wall.
So what happens exactly? Does he just not get any readings?
It's more than that. He describes Bartnikov as a difficult man to feel, possessing a strong personality that actively resists his attempts. And it wasn't just a lack of information. Jackowski actually describes feeling drained, like he was being pulled back by Bartnik, suggesting a sort of psychic tug of war.
Whoa, that's intense. It's like their minds were battling it out on some unseen level.
Exactly. It raises questions about the potential for mental influence or even psychic warfare, which has long been a subject of speculation and in some cases real-world research.
Wow, so it's not just about seeing things, but potentially influencing them as well. That takes things to a whole other level.
It certainly suggests some more dynamic interplay between minds than we typically consider.
So what ultimately happens with Bartnik? Does Jackowski manage to break through that resistance?
He actually gives up on the attempt, entirely choosing not to even keep Bartnik's name on his desk. He seems to suggest that there are limits to these abilities and that some individuals might be more resistant to psychic probing than others.
It's almost like some people have built-in psychic shields. So if even a powerful clairvoyant like Jackowski can encounter resistance, it makes you wonder about the true nature of these abilities and the potential for both success and failure in tapping into them.
It certainly highlights the complexity of the human mind and the potential for both conscious and unconscious defenses against these sorts of probes.
All right, so from potential psychic battles, we shift gears to something that always captures the imagination. Visions of the future. Jackowski shares a series of what he calls loose visions.
Okay.
And some of them are pretty unsettling.
This is where we enter the realm of precognition, the ability to foresee future events. It's one of the most debated and intriguing aspects of paranormal research.
He mentions a massive fire involving toxic materials in a circular shape somewhere in Europe, a significant stock market downturn, and a tragic event involving 4 children.
These types of precognitive visions often spark debates about whether they are warnings or simply glimpses into potential futures.
Right.
It raises ethical questions about whether we have a responsibility to act on such information, even if we can't be certain of its accuracy.
It's a heavy burden to carry if you believe you're seeing glimpses of potential tragedies. And then there's this particularly vivid vision of a passenger plane flying low for an extended period, possibly leading to a crash during landing or a forced landing attempt.
Visions involving air travel seem to be a recurring theme in precognitive accounts, perhaps tapping into our primal feels about flight and the potential for disaster.
It's definitely unsettling imagery, and it makes you wonder if there's any way to know how much weight to give these sorts of premonitions.
That's the challenge with precognition, discerning genuine glimpses of the future from random thoughts or anxieties. It's a realm where skepticism and open-mindedness need to coexist.
So we've got attempts to connect with the dead visions, aligning with real-world events, potential psychic battles, and glimpses into the future. Honestly, it's a lot to process, and I'm finding myself bouncing between a sense of awe and a healthy dose of skepticism.
That's the appropriate response, I think. It's natural to be both intrigued and skeptical when encountering claims that challenge our conventional understanding of the world. But I think it's also important to avoid dismissing these experiences outright.
Right, especially when you consider the detail in some of these visions, like the truck driver's accident.
Yeah.
It's hard to brush it off as mere coincidence, especially if the accounts align with verifiable facts.
Exactly. It's in those moments where the lines blur that things get really interesting, and that's what makes this whole topic of near-death experiences so fascinating, which is something we've got a lot of listener questions about.
Yeah, you sent over a bunch of articles about NDEs, and some of the accounts are just mind-blowing. People describing leaving their bodies, encountering a bright light, feeling overwhelming peace and love.
What's particularly striking is how consistent those elements are across cultures and backgrounds. Regardless of someone's religious beliefs or upbringing, there seems to be this common thread running through these experiences.
Okay, so let's dive into the world of NDEs next and see what we can make of these remarkable accounts.
Sounds good. Before we jump into those NDE accounts, it's worth acknowledging that skepticism about these phenomena is perfectly valid. The scientific community tends to approach these claims with caution, looking for rigorous evidence and controlled experiments.
Right, totally. It's important to have a healthy dose of skepticism, especially when we're dealing with experiences that challenge our conventional understanding of the world.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think it's also important to be open to the possibility that there might be more to reality than we currently understand.
Exactly. And that's what makes these near-death experiences so fascinating. We have these accounts from people who have been clinically dead sometimes for extended periods, who come back with vivid, often life-altering experiences.
Okay, so you sent in a bunch of articles about NDEs, and I have to admit, some of these stories are just incredible. What are some of the common themes that emerge from these accounts?
Well, one of the most frequently reported elements is the out-of-body experience. People describe feeling like they're floating above their physical bodies, observing the scene around them. Some even report being able to see and hear things that were happening in other locations far from where their bodies were.
Whoa, that's wild. Like they're actually seeing things from a different perspective, almost like a disembodied consciousness.
Precisely. And what's even more intriguing is that in some cases, these out-of-body perceptions have been corroborated by witnesses or medical records, suggesting that they might be more than just hallucinations.
That's what really gets me, the fact that some of these accounts align with verifiable details, like descriptions of medical procedures or events happening in other rooms. It's hard to dismiss that as just imagination running wild.
Right. It raises the question, if consciousness isn't solely confined to the brain, how are these individuals perceiving information when their brains are essentially offline?
One case that really stood out to me was that of Pam Reynolds, who underwent a radical brain surgery where they essentially stopped her heart, lowered her body temperature, and drained all the blood from her brain.
That case is particularly fascinating because they took extensive measures to ensure Pam couldn't have any sensory input during the procedure. Her eyes were taped shut, her ears were plugged, and she was monitored for any signs of brain activity.
And yet she came back, describing the surgical procedure in detail, even mentioning specific instruments and conversations that took place while she was supposedly unconscious.
Her account challenged the conventional understanding of consciousness as solely dependent on brain activity. It raised the possibility that consciousness might be able to operate independently of the physical body, at least under certain circumstances.
It really makes you wonder what's going on in those moments when the brain is essentially shut down, yet consciousness seems to persist. Another story that really grabbed me was about a young boy named Colton Burpo, who had a near-death experience during emergency surgery for a burst appendix when he was just 4 years old.
Colton's case is especially interesting because of his age. He claimed to have visited heaven, meeting deceased relatives he'd never met in life, and even seeing Jesus. His story resonated with a lot of people and became a best-selling book and even a movie.
What's so striking about his story is how his descriptions of heaven align with those common themes we see in other NDE accounts. Feelings of overwhelming love, a sense of peace and joy being surrounded by light. It's like there's a common thread running through these experiences, regardless of age, background, or belief system.
Exactly. It suggests that there might be some universal aspects to these experiences, something that transcends individual differences and cultural conditioning.
You know, it's not just these dramatic cases involving surgery or near-fatal accidents. You also sent in some articles about people having NDEs during moments of intense emotional or psychological distress.
Yes, we see this in cases of profound grief, deep meditation, or even situations where individuals feel like their lives are in imminent danger, like being lost in the wilderness or facing a life-threatening illness.
One story that stuck with me was about a mountain climber who fell into a crevasse and was trapped for hours. He thought he was going to die and described this incredible feeling of peace washing over him. Then in that moment of acceptance, he claimed to see a vision of his deceased wife who comforted him and told him to keep fighting.
That speaks to the idea that NDEs can be triggered by a variety of factors, not just physical trauma. It suggests that consciousness might be able to detach from the body under extreme duress, regardless of the specific trigger.
So we've got out-of-body experiences, encounters with deceased loved ones, feelings of peace and love, visions of light. It's all pretty remarkable. But the big question is, what are we to make of all this? Are these just hallucinations produced by the brain under stress? Or are they glimpses into something beyond our physical reality?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And there's no easy answer. Science is still grappling with how to explain these experiences, especially those that involve verifiable out-of-body perceptions or accurate accounts of events occurring while someone is clinically dead.
Yeah, it's like science is catching up to these experiences, trying to find a way to fit them into our current understanding of the world. But maybe, just maybe, these experiences are pushing the boundaries of what we consider possible, forcing us to expand our understanding of consciousness and reality.
That's a great point. It's possible that we're dealing with phenomena that lie outside our current scientific framework, requiring us to develop new models and theories to fully grasp their significance.
It's like we're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. Maybe we need to rethink the shape of the hole altogether.
Exactly. We might need to expand our thinking, our very definition of what's possible, to fully appreciate the implications of these experiences.
So where do we go from here? We've explored clairvoyance, near-death experiences, and even touched on the idea of psychic espionage. What other avenues can we explore to deepen our understanding of the paranormal?
Well, one fascinating area to consider is how different cultures around the world view death and the afterlife. These perspectives offer a rich tapestry of beliefs and traditions that can shed light on the human desire to understand what lies beyond this earthly realm.
Yeah, it's interesting how in Western cultures, we tend to have this very linear view of life and death, almost like a beginning and an end.
Hmm.
But you sent over some research on how other cultures view death, and it really got me thinking about different ways of approaching this whole mystery.
That's what I find so fascinating about exploring these different cultural perspectives. It challenges our assumptions and expands our understanding of the human experience. For instance, in many indigenous cultures, death isn't seen as an ending, but as a transition to another realm, often closely connected to the natural world.
So instead of a separation, there's a sense of continuity between the living and the dead.
Exactly. And in these cultures, the spirits of the deceased are often believed to remain present in the community, offering guidance and protection. There's a deep reverence for ancestors and a sense of interconnectedness between the physical and spiritual realms.
It's almost like the veil between the worlds is thinner in those cultures, or maybe they just approach it with a different mindset.
Perhaps it's a combination of both. And this reverence for ancestors often manifests in practices like ancestor veneration, where offerings are made and rituals are performed to honor those who have passed on. It's a way of maintaining a connection and seeking wisdom from those who came before.
It sounds like a beautiful way to honor the legacy of loved ones and keep their memory alive.
It is, and it highlights the diverse ways in which humans have attempted to make sense of death and find meaning in the face of the unknown.
You also mentioned some intriguing traditions from Eastern cultures like Hinduism and Buddhism, where reincarnation plays a central role.
Yes, in those traditions, death is seen as a shedding of the physical body, but the soul or consciousness is believed to be reborn into a new life based on past actions and karma.
So instead of reaching a final destination like heaven or hell, it's more about a continuous cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, with each lifetime offering an opportunity for growth and evolution.
Precisely. And the ultimate goal in these traditions is to break free from this cycle of reincarnation and achieve a state of enlightenment or liberation.
It's a very different framework from the Western emphasis on judgment and eternal reward or punishment.
It is, and I think exploring these different perspectives helps us appreciate the vast spectrum of human beliefs about death and the afterlife. There's no one-size-fits-all answer, and each culture's traditions offer a unique lens through which to contemplate these profound questions.
It's a reminder that there are so many different ways of making sense of the world and our place in it.
And perhaps that's the most important takeaway from all of this. The mystery of death and the afterlife has captivated humanity for as long as we've been able to contemplate our own existence. And while we may never have definitive answers, the very act of exploring these questions, engaging with different perspectives, and pondering the unknown is what enriches our understanding of ourselves and the universe we inhabit.
It's humbling to realize that there's still so much we don't know.
Indeed. But that's also what makes it so exciting. The unknown is a vast and fertile ground for exploration, inviting us to question, to wonder, and to keep searching for meaning and understanding.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with this thought.
Okay.
We've explored clairvoyance, near-death experiences, different cultural perspectives on death and the afterlife, but ultimately the most important question is, what do you believe?
What resonates with your own experiences, your own intuition, your own sense of what lies beyond?
We encourage you to continue this exploration on your own. Read research, reflect, and talk to others about these topics. Because in the end, it's through this process of seeking, questioning, and exploring that we come closer to understanding not only the mysteries of the universe, but also the depths of our own being.
And who knows, maybe in that journey of exploration, we'll catch a glimpse of what lies beyond.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the unknown. Until next time, keep exploring.